Okay, and recording has now started. Thank you everyone for joining our first show and tell. We are the Platform API team. I'll introduce everybody in just a moment. And this show and tell is to cover our first two sprints, which because of bank holidays and various other reasons, has been just 7 working days. In this presentation, we're going to have a quick look at what the project is, who's working on it, what we learned in our discovery, and the work that we have done in the last 2 weeks. So this project is part of a wider effort to separate the user interfaces, the business logic, and data of our various databases used throughout the council. And the intention is to enhance the experience of residents and staff, enable faster delivery of services and new services at a lower cost with a 99.99, Rashmi puts in all the nines, I think is fantastic, for availability, scalability, and a reliable solution, and to have a consistent view of residents and properties. So this is our team. We are a number of people from Hackney and a fantastic team from MadeTech. From Hackney, we have Ben Reynolds-Carr, Bucky Yomatoso, sorry, I might get some names wrong, Humaira Mulla, Mirella Georgieva, and Rashmi Shetty. And from MadeTech, we have Ben Pert, Emma Corbett, Louise Swift, and Rennie. I'm sorry, I can never remember your surname. That's me embarrassed for the rest of the day now. We will be joined shortly by a couple of other devs on the Hackney side, as we want to try and get as much work as we can do out in the next couple of sprints. So I'll hand over to Rashmi now to explain what a Platform API is.
Thank you. So somewhere last year, we have introduced the terminologies, what are platform APIs and service APIs. So we are proud to say that these are the terminology that Hackney has developed, and how we categorize APIs and how do we go about building and developing them. It's all about mastering data end of the day. By having these two, we ensure that we are mastering the underlying data model, as well as provide data in open standard in every respect. So, okay, so the model, the story, what is a platform API? So as we define it as platform APIs are data-driven, domain-modeled APIs that expose generic data for reuse for several services of similar data set, which means it's a holistic representation of domain specified. Also, it becomes a foundation layer for our API ecosystem, allowing high-level APIs access to data sources below. So what are these different terminologies, as you can see on this diagram? We highly recommend that all our platform APIs are reusable. That means we develop once and it's used by every services of that data set. Then we also say that it shouldn't be including any kind of complex processing, because if it does, then it doesn't become a platform API. It becomes a service API. And also it should master the underlying data model, no matter what. Also, the data what we produce in our terms of response, it should be generic enough so that we develop services on the top of it. And as I said before, it's consumed by multiple services of the same data set. And that's the reason why we say platform API is so important as a foundation layer of our API ecosystem. Darren, can we go next, please? So what have we done? So we started with the discovery phase to make sure that we understand what we are dealing with. So the first brief what we were given was trying to understand the contact information about every resident, what we have in all the system, what we own at Hackney. So we started our discovery work just after Easter, trying to build specifically around UH initially, but then we kind of expanded the whole session. We pivoted to widen the number of data sources and to layer on vulnerability indicator to support the council's pandemic response. Obviously, with the current scenario, we wanted to have one view about resident, so that if any call comes to a customer service downstairs, they know who are they speaking to and have the complete understanding about the resident information. When we started with the discovery, we said, okay, let's see how many data sources we had. I remember I came up with 9 initially, and then it just went up and up and up, and then we stopped at 26. Darren, please feel to correct me.
Yes. No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, and I was like, okay, do we have any more left? And pretty much those are the 26 data sources where all our resident information are lying around. There's no like a connector between these data sources. So obviously to start with 26, it will be a big ask. So we decided we'll start with 7 and then gradually build on that. So these are the 7 data sources what we have started with: UH, Mosaic, I Need Help database data, Camino, Academy, NHS Shield, and LLPG. Currently, we are just focusing on the contact details, which means first name, last name, address, NI number, NHS number, and a few others. But these are the initial data columns that we are currently concentrating on. Obviously, vulnerability is very complex. When we try to expand on the definition and the criteria behind it, that was used to deal with, and we thought, right now, let's focus on these columns first, and then we'll add those criteria later on as we become more confident about the data sources we are handling now. So yes, as I said, there were 26 data sources. Sorry, I did not add all of them, but yeah, as you can see from the picture, it's quite evident. So what we have decided, each data sources will be having a platform API around them that will serve the resident contact information platform API, which means we'll have 26 platform API, which will be fed with the main contact information API. The reason why we went for this particular architecture is, even if we have to build any new system or services around it, we don't have to be completely dependent on one API, which means we are not trying to keep all our eggs in one basket. So if one API goes down, we don't have to worry about much because it will still be there, and it also brings the data more together and it will be resilient. This approach is the best approach what we think at this stage. And going forward, obviously the dream is to have a cleansed database which will be served by one API. But at this stage, we thought, okay, let's have 26 different platform API. If these APIs will be used for any other services as well. But yeah, this is the first approach that we have taken so far. Great. So how did we start going about it? So as soon as we finished with the discovery phase, we were joined by our May Tech colleagues, and we decided on, let's start from the groundwork. That means building up a foundation, right? So which means if our foundation is correct, it will help us to spin up our APIs quite quicker. So obviously that involves tech stack discussion, architecture, how we are going to be dealing with, what is the testing approach, how do we deal with the data migration, because obviously we will be having scenarios where we'll be facing a lot of problems around data. How is the data accessible? Are we still reading directly from an on-prem? Are we going to be hosting them somewhere else? I'm sure Mirella, my colleague, will be expanding on this. So I hand over to Mirella. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi, and hello, everyone. So yes, we had 2 workshops deciding on our tech stack and architecture, and we have come up with some decisions. In terms of tech stack, we decided for implementation, we're going to be using .NET Core, as this is the skill that all Hackney internal developers have, which means that any API we produce can be maintained and supported by our in-house team going forward. We chose AWS as our cloud provider for hosting our APIs. We are using Terraform, so we can automate creating AWS resources by following the code infrastructure as code approach. We're going to be using Circle CI, which is our tool to create CI/CD pipelines. So whenever we push new code changes, they automatically get deployed in our hosting environment. And we're going to be using AWS DMS, which is data migration service, for our data migration process. So in terms of architecture, I'll be expanding a bit on what Rashmi just explained that we agreed during discovery. We did agree on having a single API per on-prem data source, so we can follow our microservice architecture approach. This means that APIs will be completely independent. If there is an error happening in one of them, it would not affect and bring down any of the other ones. And moreover, if we have a service that only requires, let's say, tenants and leaseholds housing information, that front-end service can simply plug into that one platform API without being concerned of the overall combined API. And it will make it much more easy to manage access. Like in this example, if a service is built to only show housing information and we want to make sure they don't see any social care information, then using the individual platform API will help us achieve that. So the other thing that we agreed on is that we need to migrate data from on-premises to cloud. This is because our on-premises service quite often has scheduled maintenances. For example, UH goes down during the weekend, every weekend, which means any API reading data from UH would go down as well and would not work during that maintenance window. But migrating our data on cloud would ensure that we have high availability of data. Moreover, we are ensuring that we are not affecting the performance of any of the on-prem services. So no matter how many API queries we run, we are running them against our cloud databases and not affecting any of the, there is no chance of bringing down any of the on-prem services that exist. Our future goal is basically to create a combined .NET Core API, as Rafi mentioned, which will bring out that single record for a person, but that would come with the future iterations. For now, the focus is on pretty much everything up to the individual APIs. And to achieve that in a quick manner, we have updated our base API template. This template includes all our basically decisions on configurations, such as how our pipeline work, our Terraform setup, any of our monitoring tools, our linting rules, and all of that is already pre-configured within this template, which means that whenever we need to create a new API, it will be much quicker as developers simply use this template, which has everything configured for them, and only add their code to it, which will ensure consistency and speed of development. Thank you, Darren.
Hi everyone, I'm Lenny. I'm an engineer from Maytech. So I'm going to talk about our testing approach. So we had a workshop to talk about our testing strategy for the project so that we could have some guidelines in place so that we have consistent tests, we're testing properly, and overall just having a guideline on code quality and readability. So it was a great opportunity to learn from each other, being a mixture of teams. Each person was able to bring forth their experience with a testing tool, and we were able to talk about it, discuss it, and come up with a strategy that everyone agreed with. So we've come up with some of these approaches that have been listed here. So like a testing framework, what testing framework to use, going by TDD, the test-driven development standard, having test coverage that doesn't go down. So this means that we're writing code that is covered by tests, making sure we don't have any redundant code, having unit tests and end-to-end tests that will run in the CI pipeline. So this is to make sure that whatever we're pushing, it's code that is functional code that would go into master and not anything that could break, and having tests that are covered, use cases that are covered by end-to-end tests. So making sure that any user stories we're working on, there's a test that shows the actual interaction from start to finish. And the full documentation of our approach is in GitHub for transparency and visibility. So I'm going to hand over to Emma, who will talk more about the data migration.
Hiya. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the outcome from our workshop around data migration. So yeah, like Mirella mentioned, we quickly decided that we were going to be using Amazon's data migration services, and then that will be used in conjunction with a change data caption option on the on-premise database, which will allow updates to be reflected in our Mirror cloud databases. And then we also discussed what we all thought would be a good data migration, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So yeah, again, the 99.99999 availability for data. This is more of a general thing for our cloud databases, but it also is relevant to the data migration. Also, we wanted to make sure that the on-premise databases weren't negatively affected at all. We obviously didn't want to take them down in the migration. And also that any updates to the data in the on-premise database would be reflected in the Mirror databases to as close to real time as we possibly could. Yeah, we also want setup to be automated. I think we mainly discussed Terraform, and we want any metrics or events to be logged, and if any errors occur, then we should receive alerts for that. And so far, what we've started doing is a ticket to look into automating DMS with Terraform, which is nearly finished at the moment. So that's good progress. Thanks.
So the last item that we, sorry, hi, I'm Ben. I'm one of the two Bens working on this project. This is not in any way going to get confusing. I am the Ben from Hackney. The final thing that we had as a target for this first sprint was to have a spike testing what we've agreed on the Mosaic database and retrieving data from the Mosaic database. So to that end, we updated the base template, set up the Terraform for the base API, set up the continuous integration, agreed testing rules and linting styles, automated setting up of the DMS for Terraform, but we didn't manage to start work on migrating the Mosaic data. However, that was due to unforeseen circumstances in which it took longer to access that information than was originally expected. But that does mean that we now have a very thorough, we've had very thorough oversight. And on the positive side, we've done privacy impact assessment for the data use and had conversations with a lot of business areas who are now really keen and supportive of what we're doing. And we'll also be able to reuse this approach for other sources going forward. So whilst we've not managed to get the spike done, we have definitely set up a lot of processes that will benefit us going forward for the remainder of the project. And I'll hand back to Darren to close.
Thank you, everyone. Do we have any questions for my fantastic team? Everyone's very quiet. I can only assume that we've answered all possible questions that anyone may have had. This is fantastic.
I have a quick question, if I may.
Yes, Tom.
So in terms of the way that front-end users then interact with the data in the databases in their new guise, in their new instances, does it change anything, or are we looking to change anything about the control elements, the processes, and so on? What inherently changes for the user, particularly around access control and so on?
So the access, in terms of access control, well, we still have API key in place. They will have to have an API key in order to use that API. But also we'll be looking at tightening that process while making sure everything is in place. That's one thing is there already in our list, that security is important when it comes to the accessing APIs in a secure way. So also some work around API Hub as well. So nothing majorly, but this will be a foundation work as well as background work around the security of the API, so that if somebody gets hold of an API key in a malicious, we are not getting a lot of attacks from that particular person or some around those. So those are the process will be also be reviewed as part of this API project. Specifically, also because we are dealing with a lot of contact information to start with. So it's a lot of privacy, the private data around. So we need to be making sure that whatever we develop and produce is secure enough.
And if I may add to that,
Yeah.
Rashmi, also we've been discussing in the future. So when we do have that combined API pulling from so many different sources, and we have front-end services wanting to use that API, but we know that this front-end service is going to work with business areas that are not supposed to see, let's say, social care data. We are thinking of implementing this within the API, so the return object pulls data from everyone else but social care, etc., like depending on what the access needs to be. Or if the service only needs to pull from one area, they can just use the single platform API. So in that way, we maintain access and we ensure that people who are not supposed to see a given set of data, they're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Matthew, you have a question?
Yeah, I'd be grateful for thoughts from folk about how we manage data integrity. So we're taking a copy of the data because connecting to live databases may not be smart for a number of perfectly sensible reasons. But if we're providing people with new services and they're reading from a copy of the data, then it becomes harder to reconcile conflicts.
Yeah.
What are the thoughts of the group about how we're going to tackle that?
So the reason why we chose DMS is quite optimum in that term. So it will we can run DMS every 5 minutes or 1 minute or every second about how we configure it. So that gives us a good foundation to make sure whatever data we provide to the front end service is up to date, and we are not giving a day older or few hours older data. And this is the reason why DMS gives a very good approach in that terms, in order to make sure that we have data integrity in place.
I think the complication comes when you're trying to write back, if that front end is trying to change the information, where does it change it? And
So,
other services that are connected to the on-prem database are changing things as well. That's when it all gets really complicated.
yes, so we have that in my mind as well. So obviously the first iteration is to concentrate on the get endpoints to make sure that we getting the data, retrieving the data quite efficiently. Yes, we do have update endpoints as well, like where we put in when we insert the data, where is it supposed to go? Does it goes to the Postgres database, and from there we trigger events, lot of event that updates the on-prem, or do we update directly on-prem? So those are things that we'll be reviewing as we go along from the future iterations. Yeah. So those are things is already there in our list, that we don't have two discrepancy in data integrity, and we do not provide two different copies of the same record.
I wonder if there might be a really interesting early use case to consider. We know that one of the frictions in housing is not knowing whether a tenant is known to social care. And the COVID-19 dashboard has helped with that significantly. I wonder if getting this data into manager tenancy might have really useful early application of the benefits of this.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Yeah.
The other possibility, of course, is we're now taking adult social care front door calls in customer services, and we don't have any sort of CRM to support that, nor do we currently have access to Mosaic for perfectly good reasons, and that could be another useful possible application.
Yes. Yeah. The very good use case for us to consider. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
No, Bobo, no.
I've noted those down, Matthew, for consideration.
It's recorded, so we can put it in the time capsule.
That is very true. It's easy to forget that these things are being recorded, and I've got the recording button right in front of me. Any other questions from anyone?
In some of our recent projects where we've been working on connecting AWS to on-prem databases, we've always found that the network connectivity between the two environments has been a bit of a Achilles heel and often causes us delays and things like that. I just wonder have we thought about addressing that as part of this project, or is that something that's going to be tackled differently?
Yeah, interestingly, we have already made sure that that's in our list. So Mission Lab on AWS Connect had that issue where we couldn't migrate a new API or a transaction API onto the new control tower only because of the VPN issue, and VPN goes down every now and then. So Matthew Keyworth and Manish from AWS had a session along with Lindsay about how we are going to resolve it. And I think they have agreed on few steps that could help us to make sure that VPN doesn't go down when we are connecting the on-prem with on-cloud. So yeah, so we have actions from that conversation as well. And I suppose Lindsay is already on that particular ticket, and hopefully that should be resolved as we go. Yeah. So we have that in our mind already. Thanks, Chris.
Cool.
Has anyone got a final question? We've got 2 minutes left.
Just very quickly. So recognizing this is primarily about the platform API and testing the concept with these data sets. Is there scope to develop the project to look at opportunities better to manage the data that's in the databases and address some of the shortcomings that we've got in some of our line of business applications, thinking about things like retention of record retention and applying rules there? or would that be managed as a separate project?
I don't see it as a separate project, because at the end of the day, it's all going to be part of the platform area. For example, document API, where most of the retention will be coming into place. But how far are we going to retain the document and lifecycle around it? So I do see it as a part of the platform API project, unless until I'm completely wrong on that one. But yes, I do see it as a part of this project, to be honest. Yep. So one of the APIs that we would like to go forward once we are finished with this one, we would like to see the documents as well around how efficiently we can get it, and how can we find the life cycle around it and have a retention policies.
Lovely. I'll get my thinking cap on and perhaps we can have a chat
Sure.
offline as well.
Yes,
Cheers.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much for your questions and for your time. If ever, as ever, if anyone does have further questions, please just drop one of us a line. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with more progress to show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks all.